The problem is that you have probably been trained out of doing this because that's not how we're rewarded in life. I'm Heather Grzych, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrzych.com or on Instagram at heathergrzych. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. I want you to think about where you live, and I want you to think about the different seasons that you live in and the different plants that you notice growing around you in different seasons. So you might notice daffodils in spring. These, where I live, this is what I noticed. Daffodils in spring and other types of wildflowers in that vein growing in the spring. And then, in the summer, we have these really great trees that have these red things, these like bottle brush trees. So every plant kind of flowers in different seasons. And some people will actually plant their gardens in a certain way in which their flowering is occurring all year round, right? So if you live in a climate where that's possible, obviously if it's snowing in your winter, it's a little bit different. But where I live, it doesn't snow. And so you can actually have different plants flowering at different times of the year. And that's very interesting because you would just assume, well, shouldn't all flowers be blooming in the spring? Like, shouldn't they all be blooming in the spring? Because spring is like the flower season, isn't it? And while it is for many flowers, it is not for all flowers. And what makes them all different? So just like people, we all do things at different times, and we're generally the same, but we're also a little bit different. One body will be cold and love hot weather, and another body will be hot and hate hot weather, and another body will be very wet and hate humidity, and another body will be very dry and love humidity. There's a thing about how old people all move to Florida, because it's warm and humid. And when you get older, your body gets more dry, and the warmth feel really good in a dry body. Also, when your body gets more dry, your temperature can fluctuate more quickly because water is a stabilizing element. And that's one of the reasons that older people, their temperatures can change very rapidly, and they need to be careful when they get very hot or when they get very cold. Blooming is really relative to an individual, just like with a plant, an individual type of plant, flower, seed, and also each little seed has its own little unique things about it. So because I work with people that are embarking on some kind of creative endeavor, reproduction being one example of this, which is interesting because the flower of the plant is essentially the plant saying, I'm ready to procreate. But we also flower in other ways. We flower when we create a business. So this reproduction, this sort of creative capacity that we have, whereas like in yoga, one of the goals is actually to channel that creative energy, not necessarily into creating children, but into other things in your life. And there's, some of the strangest things, like sexual things I've ever heard of people doing are from monks, so there's a lot of playing with this creative energy that's happening. So a lot of things are creative that we don't think about. Digestion is creative. Freud pointed this out to us. Freud said in the anal stage, the child will learn what happens when they create a poop. If their parent gets upset that they made a big mess, or if their parent claps for them and says, oh, you created this poop, which I will say when I had a child, I kind of had fun with this and used to, clap every time my kid went to the bathroom because I was so afraid of him turning into some child that was what Freud would say, the anal retentive kind of locked up type of person. And so we all learned when we were children that what happens when we create a poop. And, reproduction is another example of this creative power. And another reason that I think Ayurveda is very creative, which is the type of medicine that I practice, is that if you're thinking about changing something about yourself, whether that's your health in your mind or your body, that is a creative endeavor. It is a creative endeavor because you're doing the work of rewriting yourself. You have genes, but you also know that your genes can be expressed based on different stimuli, different actions that affect that body. So you do have some power over how you are being rewritten as your body is constantly regenerating. And I feel that that is a very creative process. And that's why it is work of the mind and the body and the spirit. It is not just the work of the body. It is not just the work of the mind. And it is not just the work of the spirit. It is all together. The body and the mind will become rewritten in these endeavors. And I'm telling you, I've seen this time and time again, that a client does a cleanse and then suddenly their attitude or their mood or their thought patterns are completely changed just from doing a cleanse. Just from changing their physical state, their mind changes. It's not like they don't remember something that happened to them. They know something still happened, but it has a very different effect and charge, and different types of thoughts come up about that event. And if you stay in this pure state after you do a cleanse, then the magic will stick. But then if they go back into like this unhealthy pattern that maybe helped create this in the first place, then everything's going to revert right back into the old patterns. So that's why healing is not like just this one-time thing. It has layers to it and it has to be reinforced. And it's one of the reasons not everybody explores Ayurveda, because not everybody has the self-discipline for it. And honestly, this is why my programs are designed the way they are, that I work with people for months, because you want changes that stick. This is not a magic pill. You don't just get to go out and do ayahuasca in the field and then assume your life is going to change. Like even people that do that, they realize when they come back, they still have their actual life that they have to deal with when they come back. They call it integration, right? And then they need the support when they come back. So this isn't about a magic pill. This is about good old mind, body, spirit reprogramming. And we are constantly regenerating all the time. So why not regenerate if you know that that's happening anyway? Like hack the system, Most of my clients are women who are between the ages of late 30s and early 40s. That's probably the majority of the people that are my clients. And I did have one client last year who wanted to conceive a child, and she was in her early 50s. So not everybody. I actually worked with somebody in their 90s once, not to conceive a child, but somebody who was interested in Ayurveda in her 90s. And that was incredible because people recognize that they're always regenerating. They're always regenerating from the moment you're born until the moment you die. It is all regenerating all the time. So most of the people, though, because I wrote a fertility book and a lot of people are interested in that topic right now, most of my clients are people who are thinking about conceiving, or they've been trying to conceive, or they've been doing IVF or something like that. And they're usually between the ages of late 30s or early 40s. And their male partners range from like the 30s to the 60s. And yeah, so a lot of women, some of them have older partners, some of them have younger partners. And most of my clients are very educated, and higher education is correlated with waiting to have children, more fertility kind of barriers for various reasons. And you might know about me that I couldn't get pregnant in my early 30s. And I had tried back then and I couldn't get pregnant. But then I later had a baby the year I was turning 40. So when I think about blooming, I think about, well, I should have had that baby in my early 30s. That was the right time to do it. But every time we would try, I would feel my body like clenching up. Something inside me knew something wasn't right. Maybe it was fear. There was something inside me that knew it wasn't right. And, later I found out I had a fibroid, like all kinds of things. And if I look back and, I see that everything happened exactly as it was intended. And in that regard. And so you can't live your life comparing yourself to others. You have to live your life the way you feel it, because it's not going to work any other way. And the question is, can you feel it? Because a lot of people are disconnected from their bodies because they work too much, because they're on their phones too much, because they just are not paying attention to their bodies. And if you're not paying attention to your body, you don't actually know if you're reading it right. And I think this is probably the majority of the work that I do when I work with people, is helping people feel their bodies again, read their bodies, understand what their bodies are telling them. Because if you try to force something, what happens when you try to force something when it's the wrong time? Things don't turn out very well when you try to do that. And so how do all the flowers bloom? How is it the daffodils know that they're supposed to bloom at this time of year, and the irises know that they're supposed to bloom at this time of the year, and the strawberry blossoms and all the different flowers that are blooming? How do they all know? Well, what they do is they feel their environment. They feel it. They feel the sun, they feel the wind, they feel the temperature. And the problem is that you have probably been trained out of doing this, because that's not how we're rewarded in life. We're rewarded to get educated and get a job, and the body is just whatever. People don't think about it, maybe unless they're athletes or something like that, or they're really into yoga. Then you start paying attention. But even an athlete could sort of not listen to their body in the search of following this goal that they're trying to go after. They could go after this hockey puck and twist their ankle in the process because they didn't pay attention to something, because they were so focused on that hockey puck. So we have to be able to pay attention to the body while we're doing life. It's very easy to do this if you run off to an ashram, which I've done a fair amount of in my life, but it is harder to do it in your day-to-day life. My father has diabetes and didn't accept, and sadly had half of his foot amputated last year. I have a lot of diabetes in my family. It's one of the reasons I'm very passionate about Ayurveda. I don't want to get diabetes. I don't. And especially now, after seeing what happened to my dad, is horrifying. You think it's just it's just a little bit of extra blood sugar in my body, but it is insanely debilitating later in life, once you hit 70. And, one of the things I realized was that he was offered all this help and he didn't take it. He was offered a nutritionist. He didn't make an appointment. He was offered physical therapy. He didn't make an appointment. He had medical coverage and didn't take the help that people were recommending to him. And that was a pattern I just kept seeing with him. And so when a pattern goes on inside your body for a long time, you're ignoring it. You're ignoring it. And you don't want to ignore it. And the reason that happens is because you're trained out of doing it. You have to retrain yourself to pay attention again. And yoga and meditation practices are a huge part of the journey. For some, there are other practices that work for others, but that's just the beginning of the journey, because the parts of you that digest and assimilate your environment, like your gut, your sensory organs, this is really where we're working in Ayurveda. It's in the hollow parts of your body where you digest and assimilate everything. This is where you process everything that comes into you in these hollow parts of your body. And that's where the magic happens. And so you become connected to your environment through these hollow spots of your body, through your gut, through your senses, your nerves, through your yoni, if you're a woman and thinking about having a child. And so this is how you become connected to the environment. Food is not just what you put in your mouth. Food is everything that comes into you. And every time you violate your body's natural urges, every time you sneeze quietly because you don't want to disrupt the room, or every time you hold back some other natural urge, I have to pee and I'm not going because I got to finish this report to my boss by 5 p.m. or something. Every time you do that, you are blocking the natural flow in your body every time you hold a natural urge. And many people hold themselves back because they don't want to disrupt the environment, or there's some other consequence they think is going to happen. Maybe because you don't want to embarrass yourself. You think it's like, oh, I shouldn't sneeze loudly because that's not what a lady does. Or I don't know. They don't want to embarrass themselves, or they don't want to get criticized for some reason. Maybe there's a fear of being criticized. So why do we hold ourselves back from our environment? There's a lot of different reasons. You want to understand these things because your blooming actually requires you to be unapologetically you. So I want you to think about, like, in the last week, can you think of anything that you've done where you did not honor a natural urge, but you did something that you knew was not wise for your body for another reason? I want you to think about that. Or if nothing comes to mind in the last week, maybe the last month. You have to be unapologetically you. And sometimes that requires a little bit of help to feel that, like, what does it feel like to be unapologetically me? What does my true nature actually feel like? Because if you've been disconnected from your body, then it's gotten lost. You don't know the feeling anymore. And so in an Ayurvedic consultation, for example, that's where we start. Because it's not just your mind or the feedback that you're going to get from your environment that's going to tell you if you're blooming. All the people around you are go, oh, you're really blooming. They might notice the color in your face change. They might notice your skin clear up. They might notice you're happier. But the real test is in your body. And it is your job to focus on you, because no one else is in that body with you. No one else. I mean, you can get blood work run and your doctor can kind of get a sense of what's going on inside your body with you by reading your blood work and making some assumptions about why the blood work turned out that way based on what they know about you. And I could read your pulse and we can learn some things about you from your pulse that would tell me how your body's operating inside. But there's a lot that's happening inside you that not even the most skilled medical intuitive would know unless you told them, because you're the only one who can feel your own body. And I know that kind of sounds like a no-brainer, but it's super important to realize, because it's your job to focus on you. It is not the person next to you. It is not the job of your partner, and it is not your job to focus on your partner. It is your job to focus on you. Focus on your own blooming. And because you are on a hero's journey of your life, and in this journey, you've had a health history that has been influenced by so many factors. I am blown away by the things my clients share with me that have happened to them in their lives. Just so many things. And when I think about the things people have been through, I'm like, wow, how do they walk around smiling? How do they get up and brush their teeth? When I know of some of the things that people have been through, to still be able to care for themselves, even after being through such difficulty. And so our lives have been influenced by so many factors. So you have to focus on your ability to read not only your body's response to the environment now, like how does my body feel when I go to Hawaii in this warm weather, or how does my body react to this gluten, or how does my body react to this IVF, whatever it is that you're putting into your body, that you're exposing your body to. These are things that are happening now. But in addition to that, there are responses that have been programmed from the past that are affecting you now. It's all converging, both physical and mental. And then what we do in Ayurveda is we look at those and we determine how we can alter them. Because your body tells a story. And it is where the proof is in the pudding, and it is time to stop messing around and give it the full attention that it wants from you. Sometimes your blooming is actually blocked due to toxicity in your body. That might show up as a growth of some sort. That might show up as inflammation. That might show up as dryness. That might show up as plaques. That can show up in all different forms of manifestation. And those are the forms that we change in Ayurveda. There is nothing, absolutely nothing like a good cleanse to help a person feel like themselves again. Toxicity literally shows up in your body with physical manifestations. A little bit of extra sugar in your blood, might produce more mucus. If you keep getting that, your hemoglobin A1C is going to get up. You're going to be told you're pre-diabetic. Your glucose levels are going to be higher than your doctor wants them to be. So those are physical manifestations of imbalance in the blood. Or maybe there's a little bit of like extra cholesterol sticking in your blood vessels. These are physical manifestations. And when you have imbalances in your body, it affects your mind. And it affects your ability to connect with the environment around you. Because if your channels are blocked in your body, then the connection is blocked. Okay, so your body affects your mind and it affects your ability to connect with the environment. It affects how you perceive the environment. I don't think a lot of people really realize this, that your body has a huge role in your psychology and in how you are able to connect with your environment. And that's one of the reasons that the state of your body is important when it comes down to fertility, because you want to make sure that your channels are open and ready to receive and not overreactive. There's not too much inflammation. There's a hospitable environment in there. Not a, like certain bodies are hospitable to the wrong kinds of things for them and not hospitable to the things that are actually good for them. And that comes from programming. So, I remember one of my clients last year, we did a cleanse together. It was about 6 days. And at the end of it, she was like, this is what it's like to feel healthy. This is what it's like to feel good. And she was like, now I know I can feel good. Now I know I can feel healthy. But before that, she didn't even know what that really felt like. She thought she did. Maybe she knew what it felt like at the end of a yoga class, in Shavasana, that always feels good. You get those endorphins, but she didn't know her true essence kind of good and healthy. And once we taste that, we know what's possible. And it's like, we just want to keep getting back to it. You have to have like a hunger for it. And they say in yoga, in the yoga philosophies, how do you make progress in yoga? Yoga is the active art and the technology of connecting. That's really what yoga is. It's about connecting things together. And so how do you make progress when you're trying to connect with something, truly connect with it, whether it's a vision or another person or your own health? Like you have to do it for a long time and you have to do it without break. You have to sustain it. You can't like start it and then stop it and give up. And you have to be very persistent and you have to do it with a lot of enthusiasm. If you're not enthusiastic about it, you're like not going to be motivated to do the things that you need to do to make the changes. And so feeling what that feels like is very motivating, to feel what it feels like, to feel your true essence, to feel this blooming coming on. So the single most important thing that you must know about blooming, even if you're a late bloomer, even if you feel like you're a very late bloomer, is to focus on your own blooming, and what that feels like to you. Because if you develop healthy routines, this is going to help you from getting further out of balance. And it can not only do that, it can actually reverse conditions that were created by unhealthy patterns. And then it can help them from recurring. It can prevent them from recurring in the future. So if you focus on your own blooming, you keep your eye on the prize. Well, what is the prize? Because maybe you've envisioned your blooming. Maybe you're like, this is me blooming. And you have a very specific picture of it in your mind. Maybe you feel like you know exactly what it looks like and exactly what it's supposed to be. Maybe you have the vision board on your wall. I'm going to have this house and I'm going to have this baby and I'm going to have this car and I'm going to have this, my vision. And then you sit and you meditate in front of it every day. Maybe you feel like you know exactly what it's going to look like. And that may or may not be the actual case. It may or may not be the actual case, because instead you have to begin to look for the feeling that the vision brings you, the feeling that it brings you, the feeling of your blooming, the feeling that you felt when you envisioned your blooming. You have to do it moment to moment, being present. And this is what takes you on your blooming path. That doesn't mean you don't accept help, by the way. Just because you're in charge and it's inside that you've got to pay attention to these feelings, it doesn't mean you don't accept help. I can tell you that I've struggled myself trying to accept help from people. I'm certainly a DIY kind of girl, and it takes a lot for me to say to someone like, hey, I need help. It takes a lot. I don't like it at all. It takes a lot for me to do that. And, I want to be tough and I want to feel like I can do it all on my own, but I can't. And it's so hard to get vulnerable. So it doesn't mean that you don't accept help, because even like the plant, that's going to get a flower to bloom, it still has to get grounded in earth. It still has roots that grow in there. It still gets sprinkled with water. We can't do anything alone. Everything is an interconnected web, but we can do it from an inner-led place of knowing, of deep listening, of self-awareness and reflection. And we need people in our corner when we do that. If you've ever seen Rocky, Rocky, the boxing movie from the 80s, I'm probably dating myself here. Rocky had his coach, Mickey. And in Star Wars, Luke had Yoda and Obi-Wan. And Harry Potter had a whole bunch of people, Hagrid and Dumbledore, and a whole bunch of people in his corner and his wand, and Cinderella had her fairy godmother. We all have challenges that we must overcome. And so we do need people in our corner, not just people in our corner, but like gardeners in our corner. So the gardener can help you discover exactly what kind of plant you are. The gardener can see you are a daffodil. You are a narcissus. You can see this, okay? If you're a gardener, this is not someone who's trying to force you into fitting into a correct way to be or a right way to live, or you must do this by the time you're this age, or whatever this stuff is. That is not gardening. That is not looking at the actual plant. You need to live the life that you were destined to live, and I want to help you do this with incredible health. It's amazing to have a human body. I think we all know this. It is so amazing. It is how we perceive the world around us. It is how we experience every beautiful sunset, every tender kiss, every delicious food. It is absolutely amazing to have a human body. And it is even more amazing when we learn to really, really, really listen to it. When we listen to it, new possibilities will arise where there was previously pain or stuckness or fear or inflammation, resistance, or other types of imbalances that are occurring. You don't have to wonder how to feel better. You don't have to regret not feeling better. You're always transforming anyway. So what we do in Ayurveda is we look at, what does this body actually want to do? Let's go with it. It's not forcing. It is learning to live with our true nature. And it takes ultimately less energy to do it because you're in your power essence, not a different kind of essence that you're forcing or pretending to be. And you have to focus on your own blooming because no one else is going to do it for you. If you are embarking on a fertility journey and are ready to have your mind blown about what your body is really capable of and how it's impacted by the environment, then check out my book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. You can actually download the introduction to the book for free on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. Read the intro for free and then buy the rest of this fertility enlightening book pretty much anywhere books are sold. I want to thank you for listening to this show. It brings me great pleasure to provide this content to you. I also want to let you know that I'll be making some very amazing announcements soon. And if you're not already on my email list, then I encourage you to go over to my website and subscribe to my email list so that I can keep you informed about these announcements that are going to be coming up very soon. So my website is heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And I look forward to getting these important announcements to you very soon and connecting. Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrzych.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.